All right, Tucker, great show, and welcome to Hannity. 9 p.m. on the East Coast of the United States, 9 a.m. right here in Singapore. And tonight we are less than 24 hours out of the president's historic summit with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. And just a short time ago, I had the opportunity to sit down with President Trump in the very room where he and Kim Jong-un kicked off their bilateral talks. Take a look. Historic day. I think most people like me want to know what was going on in that room one-on-one.
Well, the big thing is this is now my 25th hour of being up and negotiating, and we've been negotiating very hard. And one thing up front, we want to denuke the entire peninsula. We want to denuke that whole situation. That is a hotbed. And you know what's been happening for years, and nobody did anything about it. And you have to. We have no choice. We had to.
Now, we'll have the full interview with the president coming up in toto, including some very important insight into what went on behind the scenes during these highly anticipated talks. Without a doubt, this summit was a tremendous success and complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization of the entire Korean Peninsula is now in the works, and a lot is certainly hanging in the balance, including a safer world for your kids and future generations. Now, we're going to detail all of the consequential diplomatic progress from the past 24 hours. Plus, we will compare the president's diplomacy surrounding North Korea to that of President Reagan's strategy, countering the former Soviet Union. There are remarkable parallels here because we're witnessing history in the making, but no one on the left, nobody in the mainstream media, very few in the Democratic Party saw this coming. They have blind, pathological hatred for this president, and it seemingly knows no bounds. Now, today, many are still actively rooting for the president and, in the end, the country to fail on the world stage because it doesn't benefit them, regardless of all the potential danger, the potential consequences down the road. Now, we're going to show you the most petulant coverage from the past 24 hours. It'll probably shock you, but not totally surprise you. Now, under the president's leadership, the world is changing for the better. In spite of the predictable, bitter partisans, guess what? It's time to get on board. You want a safer world? You want a better economy? You want jobs? Now, that's tonight's Peace on the Peninsula-inspired opening monologue from Singapore. All right, it happened after months of doubt, speculations, and negotiation. While President Trump made history, he became the first president in U.S. history to hold direct talks with North Korea. And by all accounts, this summit went very well, exceeding expectations. Now, the meetings between President Trump and Kim Jong-un were reportedly productive, a solid first step in negotiating what is the complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Now, Trump and Kim even signed a bilateral agreement based on 4 key points. First, the two countries agreed to establish new relations. Next, the countries promised to work toward peace on the Korean Peninsula. Third, Kim Jong-un reaffirmed his commitment towards the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And fourth, and this is not really widely reported, very important, though, North Korea agreed to recover and return the remains of American soldiers that were killed during the Korean War. And President Trump and Kim Jong-un had this to say after signing that joint resolution. Let's take a look.
The letter that we're signing is very comprehensive, and I think both sides are going to be very impressed with the result. A lot of goodwill went into this, a lot of work, a lot of preparation. We're very proud of what took place today. I think our whole relationship with North Korea and the Korean Peninsula is it's going to be a very much different situation than it has in the past. We both want to do something. We both are going to do something. And we have developed a very special bond. So people are going to be very impressed. People are going to be very happy. And we're going to take care of a very big and very dangerous problem for the world.
Now, today, the positive reaction continued. Just moments ago, the president tweeted, quote, "The world has taken a big step back from potential nuclear catastrophe and more rocket launches, nuclear testing, or research. The hostages are back home with their families. Thank you, Chairman Kim. Our day together was historic." And it is important to remember these talks occurred only after the release of 3 American hostages, after an agreement from Kim Jong-un to halt nuclear tests and ICBM tests and firing missiles over Japan, and of course North Korea's destruction of one of their key missile launch sites. And Kim even, remember, he crossed the DMZ for the first time into the arms of the South Korean president, and all of this without any concessions from the United States, nothing. And in my interview with President Trump, he even indicated that North Korea's concessions will go much deeper than what they said openly.
You look at what he's done. So we got our hostages back, but they've blown up one of their sites, one of their testing sites, their primary testing site. In fact, some people say their only testing site. They're getting rid of a missile, which isn't in the document that was done afterwards. They're getting rid of a missile testing site. They're doing so much now. So it's a process, and it's really moving rapidly.
And meanwhile, shortly after signing the agreement and wrapping up the talks, President Trump held a very lengthy news conference giving immediate reaction to his historic meeting. I got to sit in a second row. Jim Acosta was 4 seats down. Fake news CNN. Take a look.
Chairman Kim and I just signed a joint statement in which he reaffirmed his unwavering commitment to complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. He was very firm in the fact that he wants to do this. I think he might want to do this as much or even more than me, because they see a very bright future for North Korea. The sanctions will come off when we are sure that the nukes are no longer a factor. I noticed that some of the people were saying that the president has agreed to meet. He has given up so much. I gave up nothing. I'm here. I haven't slept in 25 hours, but I thought it was appropriate to do because we've been negotiating for literally round the clock. Otto Warmbier is a very special person, and he will be for a long time in my life. His parents are good friends of mine. I think without Otto, this would not have happened. Otto did not die in vain. He had a lot to do with us being here today.
The President has more to say on Otto Warmbier in our interview. Now, we have contrasted on this show the stark differences between a strategy of peace through strength versus a strategy of bribery and the appeasement and bowing before dictators. Now, tonight, that contrast is all too clear once again, and the similarities between former President Reagan and President Trump are now coming into the fore. The weak, the feckless leadership from Jimmy Carter that made way for Ronald Reagan, who was left to deal with a world that was in massive turmoil. The same can be said of Obama's feeble, weak, pathetic, feckless strategy of appeasement that was ushered in, well, gave the opportunity to usher in Donald Trump. And both Trump and Reagan had very tough talk for their international adversaries. Reagan calling the former Soviet Union an evil empire. Many in the media freaking out that the California cowboy Reagan was leading us towards a nuclear war. Let's go through history. Take a look.
They preach the supremacy of the state, declare its omnipotence over individual man, and predict its eventual domination of all peoples on the earth. They are the focus of evil in the modern world. So in your discussions of the nuclear freeze proposals, I urge you to beware the temptation of pride, the temptation of blithely declaring yourselves above it all, and label both sides equally at fault, to ignore the facts of history and the aggressive impulses of an evil empire, to simply call the arms race a giant misunderstanding, and thereby remove yourself from the struggle between right and wrong and good and evil.
Now, of course, just months ago, President Trump also engaged in tough rhetoric, even calling Kim Jong-un little rocket man. Just like Reagan, the media went into a complete meltdown, once again predicting a nuclear holocaust. Remember these remarks from President Trump.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire, fury, and frankly power, the likes of which this world has never seen before. Frankly, the people that were questioning that statement, was it too tough? Maybe it wasn't tough enough. They've been doing this to our country for a long time, for many years. And it's about time that somebody stuck up for the people of this country and for the people of other countries. And what they've been getting away with is a tragedy, and it can't be allowed. If anything happens to Guam, there's going to be big, big trouble in North Korea. If he does anything with respect to Guam or any place else that's an American territory or an American ally, he will truly regret it, and he will regret it fast.
Now, our next comparison surrounds military strategy that both President Trump, President Reagan, they ramped up military spending, military drills, a military presence, reaffirmed strategic commitments to shield our allies from hostile adversaries. And one more similarity comes from the two presidents' willingness to walk away from the table. And before ultimately negotiating the end of the Cold War, well, President Reagan, you remember, well, he walked away from talks with Mikhail Gorbachev in Reykjavik. And a few weeks ago, President Trump actually canceled this North Korean summit over a dispute and has frequently asserted his willingness to walk away from a bad deal. And oh, yeah, a bonus. Both Reagan and Trump oversaw booming economies, both implementing significant tax reform, tax cuts, removing burdensome regulation and bureaucracy they both inherited. And of course, despite what we know from history, peace through strength works. No one in the mainstream media saw this coming, but they should have. We shouldn't have been surprised. But then again, these are the same people. They were wrong about Donald Trump winning the Republican primary, laughing when he got into the race. The same people wrong about Trump defeating Hillary Clinton in the general election, and the same people who were wrong about Trump-Russia collusion and a so-called scandal, when it turns out the only one colluding with the Russians was Hillary Clinton. And of course, they're completely obsessed with anything tabloid, stormy, 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 and other ridiculous topics. Take a look.
This could be the last nail in the coffin. Yeah. Stormy Daniels is causing stormy weather.
Porn star Stormy Daniels claims President Trump broke the law, had her bullied.
Does Stormy Daniels have the president's number? It sure seems that way.
President Trump might have met his match with Stormy Daniels.
How is Stormy weathering this?
Stormy speaks.
It's not clear what he meant by whole countries.
Are you shocked or surprised by this?
I'm not surprised. In one way, I'm proud. I am a proud holder.
No, we are not all created equal. At least not if you are born in, as the president put it, a whole country.
The word house instead of whole, as in house countries, not whole countries.
I guess he's a holder.
Is there a difference if the president said whole or house?
Are they ever going to learn? Apparently not. They're so ideologically driven. Not anytime soon. Listen to how a CNN fake news panel covered Trump's historic summit.
I want to bring it back to the menu for a second, not just because I'm hungry, but because typically the White House releases these kinds of details after, for example, the French president comes to the White House or another head of state comes for a state visit. So by releasing the details of the menu, this is again legitimizing Kim Jong-un.
One particularly interesting thing about the menu is I was thinking as you were reading all that out, Don, the poor North Korean people, if they knew what is being dished out there, they can't even imagine the types of foods that you rolled off your tongue.
Right, because they just don't. It's a poor country, and because of Kim Jong-un himself and his family. Again, you're right. Beef short ribs, combination of sweet and sour crispy pork, and Yangzu fried rice, soy braised codfish. I mean, that sounds really yummy and very expensive.
Sounds yummy and expensive. That's news. Now, of course, fake news, CNN's horrible coverage. It's only the tip of the iceberg. Watch this.
A summit is not an accomplishment for the American president, Brian. It is a major accomplishment for Kim Jong-un. And in fact, the spectacle of seeing the American flags along with the DPRK flags as the backdrop for that handshake is really jarring, actually, to see, to witness. In fact, I would say it's somewhat disgusting. It is actually a debasement of the American flag. This is a despotic regime that murders its own citizens. And so we're putting him on the same stage as the American president.
I don't think we should discount the idea. It's not a coincidence that this is precisely what Putin desires.
He places an overemphasis on personal chemistry and not realizing that countries have interests. They represent their interests. Kim Jong-un did a very good job of representing the interests of his nation and his own personal interests, and he snookered Donald Trump.
It may be okay in the real estate business, but it's odious and disgusting when he is fawning over one of the most vicious dictators on the planet.
You look at the polls, it's really interesting because the more we're talking about North Korea, the less we're talking about Russia, right? The less we're talking about issues at home.
This hatred now clearly borders on psychosis. If this were a major summit featuring Robert Mueller and his Russian witch hunt, every anchor would be here 24/7, and they'd all be present. They'd travel 50 hours in the air for that. Now, by the way, you can always count on MSNBC. They weren't here. Rachel Maddow, where were you? Chris Hayes, where were you? Joe and Mika? I guess too long on a plane for both of you. After all, it doesn't fit your false narrative, the caricature, and the lies that you manufacture single-handedly every minute of every day. And while the mainstream media was busy trashing the president and his push for peace in North Korea a few years ago, they were stepping all over themselves to praise President Obama in his horribly flawed and defunct Iranian deal, which was the dumbest deal in world history. $150 billion to radical mullahs in Iran, chanting death to America, death to Israel, burning American flags, Israeli flags. It doesn't get any dumber than this, but they all in the media loved it. Take a look.
The U.S. and world powers reaching a major agreement with Iran, blocking one of our biggest rivals from developing a nuclear weapon.
The president is about to deliver a statement on this historic nuclear deal reached with Iran overnight. This agreement is supposed to freeze that country's pursuit of a nuclear weapon.
Has the U.S. and its allies successfully blocked Iran from making a nuclear bomb, at least for now?
But tonight, the United States could be entering a new era in its relationship with Iran.
I think it begins to change the dynamics of a tense relationship of 36 years between Washington and Tehran. I think the deal provides more than the United States anticipated, and I think it could help prevent an arms race in the region that would be detrimental to not just the Middle East, but to the whole world.
Seems that they all had that Chris Matthews thrill running up and down their leg, but obviously this media is incapable of covering this president, President Trump, in any fair, unbiased way. And in that sense, his success is their failure. They would have to admit they're wrong. And in doing so, by the way, that means if they're correct, the world would be less safe. President successful? How can they not see how completely dishonest and agenda-driven they really are? Now, so far, betting against President Trump has not been working out particularly well for any of them. They keep getting pretty much everything wrong. So maybe it's time for them to start asking themselves, what is in the best interest of the people of the United States? And maybe they should just stop pushing their radical leftist agenda. The media said Trump would be an unmitigated disaster. In 500 days, what's happened? He's tallied a tremendous record of accomplishment. Look at your screen. As we pointed out many times, this is especially true on the economy, breaking unemployment records across the board, generating wealth like never before. And that's why tonight we are hopeful that progress will happen on the Korean Peninsula. It's good for everybody. It's good for the world. In fact, progress must happen on the Korean Peninsula. Look at the map right there on your screen. See the city of Seoul, South Korea, its population nearly tops 10 million people, making it more populous than even New York City. And Seoul is only located 35 miles away from the DMZ, well within striking distance of Kim Jong-un, and only miles away from tens of thousands of American soldiers who are tasked with protecting South Korea. One nuclear weapon could wipe it off the face of the planet. And tonight, everyone in the world should be rooting for the president's success here in the region. It's a worthy cause, a necessary cause, and millions of lives literally are at stake. And a few hours ago, I had the opportunity to sit down with the president. Here's part one. We'll show you the entire interview. Part one of my interview with President Trump right after this historic meeting. Mr. President, great to see you.
Thank you very much.
Historic day. I think most people like me want to know what was going on in that room one-on-one.
Well, the big thing is this is now my 25th hour of being up and negotiating, and we've been negotiating very hard.
This is about the complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization of the entire peninsula.
So without that, we could not have had a deal. I mean, one thing up front, we want to denuke the entire peninsula. We want to denuke that whole situation. That is a hotbed. And you know what's been happening for years, and nobody did anything about it. And you have to. We have no choice. We had to. The relationship was really good. It built. And I talked about early on in the relationship and the feeling, well, we had a very good feel right from the beginning. And we were able to get something very important done. And actually some things happened after that was signed, Sean, where we're getting rid of certain missile research areas, certain missile testing sites. They're getting rid of a lot.
You know, in the lead up to this, and this was pretty amazing because obviously I'm a pretty strong critic of our news media in the country, but a lot had happened. He had dismantled a nuclear test site. He crossed over the DMZ. 3 hostages were released. The missiles stopped being fired. He was willing. You wouldn't have come here if he was not willing to talk about denuclearization.
That's right.
So all of that happened before you walked in, and I don't remember that you sent cargo planes of cash or gave anything really before the lead up. Why do you think he's interested in doing this after spending that time with him?
Well, it's sort of interesting because I noticed some of the press, and I'm not even knocking him because honestly they've been treating me very good on this subject. What's to treat badly? Mm-hmm. But some of the press would say he's meeting with them and therefore he has a major loss. I said, since when? Mm-hmm. And others wanted to, it never worked out. It probably never could have worked out. But we really have gotten a lot. You haven't seen missiles going up in 7 or 8 months. You haven't seen research. You haven't seen nuclear tests, very importantly. Japan is very happy because they were being encircled. I mean, there was a period of time when they were going right over the middle of Japan. And we got our hostages back. And you're right, we didn't pay for that. But I think, I don't say that in a braggadocious way at all, because he did such a smart thing, because that was such a good thing to do. And I feel so badly about Otto Warmbier. That was the one thing. And Otto did not die in vain. I actually believe, and I've gotten very friendly with Otto's parents. They're incredible people, devastated, as they, as you would think, great parents. He was a great young man. But I think without Otto, this whole thing wouldn't have happened, because it crystallized when he came back in the condition. It crystallized so much to so many people, maybe even to the other side, frankly. But I think that Otto truly did not die in vain.
I've known you for a lot of years, and I think one trait that I could say is brutal honesty. In the room, alone, and then the subsequent talks with your team and their team. How honest, how brutal, what was said? Try and bring people into the room.
So we got along very well. We got along from the beginning. We started off, he and myself and 2 interpreters, and from the beginning we got along. I've made the statement, and I've said it before. I've said it about a lot of different kinds of relationships. You can almost tell right at the beginning.
Did you tell at the beginning? What was that first minute?
No, I felt very good at the beginning, and I talked about we have to denuke. This country has to be denuked, and he understood that. He fully understood it. He didn't fight it. And we're doing some great things, and for his country, and South Korea is going to be involved very much in helping, and Japan is going to be involved, and President Xi of China has been, really terrific on the border. I think less so the last couple of months, unfortunately.
Was that a big part? Because your meetings, when you met with the president of China, was scheduled, if I recall, for like 15 minutes. Didn't some go on for 4 hours?
That's right. Well, we actually met at Mar-a-Lago. He wanted to be at Mar-a-Lago, and we had a 15-minute meeting scheduled. When he comes in, we were going to go into breakout rooms where we had many people waiting for us, and it ended up lasting 4 hours. The 15 minutes, president of China, great guy, it ended up lasting for 4 hours. We just got along, and we have gotten along. I mean, I want them to treat us better on trade. That's my only problem. They've been killing us.
Didn't they make concessions on intellectual property?
Well,
trade?
They want to do things. It's a tough thing. They're doing so well. They've made so much progress against us for so many years. It's awfully tough for them to bring it back. And we'll see how that all works out. We're gonna do something. Definitely, we're gonna do something. They offered us $80 billion in purchases of agricultural products, right, but it's just not enough for what we're talking about. It's $80 billion.
What do you want?
I never thought I'd turn down $80 billion, but we have to do something with intellectual property. We have to do something just generally on trade. Last year we lost $500 billion with China. We can't do that anymore.
All right, when we come back, more of my one-on-one interview with President Trump. Stay right here as we continue from Singapore tonight. Welcome back to Hannity. We're live in Singapore as we continue now with part 2 of my interview with President Trump, where I asked him how his rhetoric with Kim Jong-un evolved and how important a role that rhetoric played. Take a look. Let's go to the beginning. There are a lot of people, critics, quickly saying, when you said Little Rocket Man or Fire and Fury, or, when he said, oh, I've got a red button on my desk, you said, well, mine's bigger and it works better than yours. How did it evolve from that to this? Because he did say at the very beginning, we're going to basically start over, but that has been building behind the scenes.
Well, I think without the rhetoric, we wouldn't have been here. I really believe that. You know, we did sanctions and all of the things that you would do, but I think without the rhetoric, you know, other administrations, I don't want to get specific on that, but they had a policy of silence. If they said something very bad, very threatening and horrible, just don't answer. That's not the answer. That's not what you have to do. So I think the rhetoric, I hated to do it. Sometimes I felt foolish doing it, but we had no choice.
So strategically you were doing it?
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think he gained respect. You know, he's a strong guy. Hey, people were saying, what's he like? He's got a very good personality. Mm-hmm. He's funny, and he's very, very smart. He's a great negotiator. And he's a very strategic kind of a guy.
One of the points that I think surprised everybody, and I think every American should be very happy about this, is the Korean War, which has gone on for so long. But more importantly, there are still American remains there, and they will be repatriated.
The remains are coming back, and we got that at the end. In fact, we have some things that you don't even have in the report. We put out the report.
Anything you can tell us?
What we signed. Yeah, missile sites that they use for the launching of missiles and missile research areas. That's going to be gone. We made a lot of progress, tremendous amount of progress. So one of the things that I'm very happy about, we're not going to play the war games anymore, which you know how expensive that is? We're flying these massive bombers in for practice from Guam. I said, how far is Guam? 6.5 hours, sir. I said, that's a long way for a big bomber times, 20. And lots of other planes coming in. So we're not going to be doing the war games as long as we're negotiating in good faith. So that's good for a number of reasons, in addition to which we save a tremendous amount of money. You know, those things, they cost. I hate to sound like a pure businessman, but I kept saying, what's this costing? I would look at them coming in from the sea and bombs exploding everywhere. I said, what does this cost? I don't even want to tell you, but it's a lot. So we're not going to be doing that as long as we're negotiating in good faith, which I think we will do.
You managed expectations, I think, pretty well. You didn't think coming in here you were going to sign an agreement, and you said maybe it takes 2, 3, 4, 5 meetings. But you were open to going as fast or as slow as you wanted.
We got along better than I would have assumed right from the beginning. We got a lot more done today than I ever thought possible. And he's going back. He's now headed back. And I think he's going back to get this done. He wants to get it done. You know, you hear the whole thing about his father and other administrations or his grandfather. The fact is that he brings that up. But they weren't dealing with me. They were dealing with different people. And
what did
never
he say was the difference?
Nobody's ever come close to
this. Did he talk about the difference between past administrations and yours?
Yes, but I can't say that because I don't want to be the one saying it. At some point, I'm sure he'll say it.
Yeah.
But they never got it done. And they were never this close either. I mean, it was never to a point where they were like we are.
Is there a history lesson to learn here? I think in one sense we could talk about past administrations. Reagan, evil empire, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. His own advisors wanted to take those words out of that speech. And you compare, Bill Clinton gave Kim Jong-un's father $3 billion in energy subsidies.
Tremendous amount of money.
The mullahs in Iran, you have said the worst deal in the history of mankind. That's
probably the worst deal I've ever seen. Worse than NAFTA, and I think NAFTA is pretty bad. Worse than the WTO, the World Trade Organization, which frankly built China, in addition to the money that we gave them all the time. You know, I mean, these were terrible deals. But I would say that the Iran deal was one of the worst I've ever seen. I will say, speaking of the Iran deal, since we got out of that deal, and we could do it very easily because they never had it approved by Congress. It was just President
This must
Obama.
be approved by Congress.
I want it to be approved by Congress because otherwise it really doesn't mean very much. I would think anybody would want it approved by Congress. But since we took out of that deal, we got out of that deal, I think Iran is a much different place. I don't think they're looking so much to the Mediterranean and Syria and Yemen. They're starting to pull people out of Yemen. They're starting to pull people out of Syria. It's a whole different thing. Now, I did it for nuclear, but one of the side benefits is you take a look, a serious look And Iran is not the country that it was 3 or 4 months ago when they were much more emboldened.
Well, certainly sanctions played a big part.
Big part.
The strike forces that you sent into the region off the coast.
And I think at a certain point, honestly, I know the Iranian people. I know many people from Iran. These are great people. I really believe at some point they're going to come back and want to negotiate a deal.
All right, when we come back, much more to get to with President Trump, and let not your heart be troubled. And we got some deep state breaking news, a showdown between the DOJ and Republicans that are trying to do their constitutional oversight. This is getting interesting in the lead up to the IG report release on Thursday. We'll have the latest. Final part of my interview with President Trump, where the president talked about the likelihood that Kim Jong-un would visit the White House or maybe Mar-a-Lago. Take a look. Did reunification come up? Did humanitarian issues come up in the meeting?
Yes, it did. And one of the things I will tell you that I'm most happy about, and that, as you know, is a big sticking point, is bringing back the remains of thousands of soldiers that were killed.
This came up last minute. This wasn't...
This was sort of last minute, yeah. I said, would it be possible? Because I get letters all the time from families who lost a son, lost a brother, lost a father in Korea. That was a rough fight.
Right.
And they were buried along the roadways. They were buried as, you know, soldiers going back and forth into battle, and they were burying them along roadways. Mm-hmm. And they're saying, please, please, could you do it? I get so many letters from people who lost a loved one in North Korea, essentially, in North Korea.
Right.
And I would say, I'm going to try. And I brought it up, and I'll tell you what, it was almost immediate. Now, in the past, you couldn't even talk about it. Mm-hmm. But it was really a nice response.
How quickly did you talk about a trip to the United States? Did you talk about...
I think at the right time, he'll absolutely be coming to the White House, yeah. Look, it's been a very intense relationship. It's been short and very intense, and of course before that it was pretty rhetorical. It was, not a pretty thing. People were very worried, but without that I don't think we would have been here today. He wants to get something done. I want to get something done. I think we'll get it done, and we started off by really a very strong document. I think people are surprised to see it. They're shocked to see it. And then add some more things that we got after that was signed.
Mm-hmm. And so can you give us maybe a glimpse into what you keep sort of referring a little bit to things that will be coming?
I just think that we are now going to start the process of denuclearization of North Korea. And I believe that he's going back and will start it virtually immediately. And he's already indicated that. And you look at what he's done. So we got our hostages back, but they've blown up one of their sites, one of their testing sites, their primary testing site. In fact, some people say their only testing site. They're getting rid of a missile, which isn't in the document that was done afterwards. They're getting rid of a missile testing site. They're doing so much now. So it's a process, and it's really moving rapidly.
Last question, because I know you have a lot to do. Obviously, he wants something on his end. Certainly, he wants the world community wants sanctions lifted. He wants economic opportunity, and his people need it desperately. There are people starving there. So I guess the question is the order. What would he have to do to get the sanctions lifted, to get the economic opportunity opened up for the people?
Well, what he wants is security, and I understand that, and he'll get that. And he wants to see if they can make that incredible location, because it's incredible. It's between China and South Korea. Think of it. I'm in the real estate business. Think of that. You have, it's prosperous South Korea.
Trump Tower, maybe
no,
the
but
first
think
thing.
how good a location is that? You have China, and you have South Korea, and he's got right in the middle of both of them, surrounded by water. Okay, that's called like. Can there be anything better than that? And it's also beautiful land. It's incredible land. So I think he understands that. I told him about that today, and I think he really understands it. And
the Chinese
he wants
happy.
To make it great.
They're involved. The South Koreans, the Japanese.
I think so. I think, look, China can't be thrilled about a very strong group of people having nuclear missiles with great capability right next to them. So I really do believe they are. They were very, very helpful. I think maybe a little bit less so in the last 2 or 3 months, because we're talking about trade and other things. And, nothing's going to interfere with my relationship with President Xi, because I have great respect for him. He's really a great man in the true sense. He's a great man.
One of the best stories you tell and it's an interesting story, historically speaking, is you were having dessert with him.
That's right, at Mar-a-Lago, chocolate cake.
You remember?
And I said,
this was after Assad had used chemical weapons on his own people.
That's right.
And you had launched the first strike.
I said, Mr. President, we just sent 58 missiles into Syria to hit a certain target. And he said, please say it again, with his interpreter. I said, we just sent 58 missiles in. By the way, to show you the technology, every single one of those missiles from 700 miles away in the ocean, ships in the ocean, every one, 58 missiles, 58 hits. It's incredible technology. What we have is so incredible, so lethal. Not that we want to do it, but so lethal. But that was done because Syria, Assad, used chemical gases on children. And we had to do that. Had President Obama gone over the red line, I think you maybe would have had a different story in the Middle East. I really believe that. But he didn't do that. But we did. And so I told him, sitting at Mar-a-Lago at dinner,
eating chocolate cake, I
said either he's going to leave or we're going to still be friends. But he didn't leave. But he understood. He really understood. He doesn't want to see that. Well, I think he really did, because he knew that a lot of people and a lot of children were killed by gas. Yeah. And he fully understood.
I know you have a lot to do. Mr. President, thanks for being so generous with your time.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Sir.
Appreciate it.
All right, still to come, reaction. Ed Henry, Danielle Hoffman, Sarah Carter, Sebastian Gorka, and we have breaking news, a showdown emerging between Rod Rosenstein, the DOJ, and Freedom Caucus members, and Devin Nunes. It's getting ugly. We'll tell you all about it straight ahead from Singapore. Those rooting for failure in North Korea, this is what he tweeted, quote. He said, a year ago, the pundits, the talking heads, people that couldn't do the job before were begging for reconciliation and peace. Please meet. Don't go to war. Now that we meet and have a great relationship with Kim Jong-un, the same haters are shouting, you shouldn't meet. Don't meet. Also tonight, we are following a developing story, according to a report from Catherine Herridge. Back in January, Deputy AG, the one I say is conflicted, Rod Rosenstein, he actually threatened to subpoena documents and emails from House Intel Committee members. Really? It's actually the opposite way around. Anyway, we continue in Singapore with reaction to all of this. Fox News Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry, former Deputy Assistant to President Trump, Fox News National Security Strategist Dr. Sebastian Gorka, Fox News contributor, investigative reporter Sarah Carter, retired CIA, 30-plus years, senior intelligence officer, Fox News contributor Danielle Hoffman. Let's start with the president, then we'll get the breaking news. It is ironic. There's no winning if you're a Democrat. No winning if you're in the left-wing media. You don't want the president to succeed. The media looks bad, and Democrats have no shot at 2018.
I mean, in North Korea, diplomacy is engaged, tension is down. I'm not sure what there is not to like about what we saw yesterday. It's not following the traditional script where we might negotiate for months and months and put a briefing package together and then sign loads and loads of documents. But in this case, with Kim Jong-un, the president had to have that initial meeting with him to set the stage for everything else. So
and it was predicated by all of these concessions on his part, which we've given a lot of attention to, crossing the DMZ, stop firing missiles. You know, he broke down the nuclear test site.
The return of the hostages.
Yeah, the hostages.
I mean, that's so important. In his foreign policy, this administration has really taken such a dramatic turn from the Obama administration. I think it was so significant, Sean, that you spoke to the president about Syria, because Syria was a lesson to the whole world. It was a lesson to Iran. It was a lesson to North Korea. He was making a statement saying, when I draw a line, I mean it. And I mean this. And the North Koreans knew that. The Iranians know that now. And the rest of the world knows it.
I think that's a great point about Iran. The world is watching. And when look, the president said, I'm going to get out of this bad Iranian deal. And he did. And very smartly he's saying, if we have a deal with Kim Jong-un, it will go through Congress and proper channels, so the next president can't wipe it out with a, wave of a pen.
Right. Everything the president has done in just over 500 days is bigger than the specific event. So the cruise missile engagement in Syria, that's not just a message for Assad's regime. that is a reassertion of American leadership. That sends a message to North Korea. It sent a message to Iran. It sent a message even to other countries such as Russia. So every single act has a larger strategic message to the world. And that's why this presidency, with his team, let's not forget, it's not one man, it's Pompeo, it's Bolton, it's Mattis. They have achieved...
But it's the president, you called it last night, the speed of Trump.
The speed of Trump.
Agenda.
Right, it's the speed of Trump. But again, let's remind ourselves...
But Pompeo did, and Bolton did a great job here.
But let's remind ourselves, he's been in office less than 6 months.
Yeah.
These results... You'd be proud of these at the end of your second term as president.
Well said.
He's not even halfway through his first term.
I would argue that there is a moment in history emerging in the Middle East, too, against Iranian hegemony, the Jordanians, Egyptians, Saudis, Emirates, Israel, and the U.S.
If I may, all of this is a geopolitical restructuring globally. Whether it's the Middle East, whether it's here in Asia, whether it's in Europe.
And America leading.
And America leading. Because what's the key message? For 8 years, the White House said, we're not going to lead. We're going to have strategic patience. We're going to lead from behind. And what happened? The world was in flames. One data point. Under Obama, thanks to Syria and everything else, we had 65 million displaced people in the world.
Let me bring in Ed Henry. Ed, our own Catherine Herridge reporting. Yeah. Rosenstein on, what was it, January 18th, closed-door meeting involving senior FBI, Department of Justice officials, member of Congress, House Intel, literally talking about subpoenaing them when they're the ones that are obstructing.
Yeah.
This fight is now getting real.
Yes, it is. And I talked to senior people on the House Intel Committee previously who have told me that, Rod Rosenstein was threatening a senior aide to Devin Nunes, the chair of the committee, with going after his emails and his text messages and his phone calls, which would violate separation of powers and sort of turns on its head the idea that the House Intel Committee and other panels in Congress have oversight power over the Justice Department and the executive branch. So this is remarkable, and it comes in the context, obviously, of the president trying to change the narrative, frankly, and trying to say we should also be looking not just at the Mueller investigation and what they're looking at with the Trump campaign and the Trump administration, but the investigation of the investigators, whether it's at Justice or FBI, Andrew McCabe in hot water as well.
This aide, and I've gotten reports that Rosenstein has a vicious temper behind the scenes. You know the source of Catherine Herridge. You think you know who it is?
Well, of course, yes. I mean, now they've outed him, and they've been trying to write stories about him. These are leaks coming from the Department of Justice, obviously from Rod Rosenstein, and it's Kash Patel. He is the lead investigator for the House Intelligence Committee. And this is how vicious Rod Rosenstein is. He's threatening him over and over again.
We'll have a lot more tomorrow, and we'll be back in Singapore tomorrow, but we'll have more Hannity right after this break. Stay with us.